Good afternoon, folks. This is Robert Chappell, Executive Editor of Madison365, with your daily update for Monday, April 12th. It's kind of a heavy one today. I think what we'll do, um, there's a lot of non COVID news to talk through. So I think, and that's what's kind of weighing on my mind at the moment. So let's do that first, and then we'll take a short pause, and then we'll do the COVID numbers because the COVID numbers are not great, but as they're not catastrophic either. So we'll talk through some news, other news first, and then we'll take a short pause, and then we'll do some COVID numbers, which again are not great. But first, though, I got to mention a important sponsor that we have. Sorry, oops. Uh, Forward Madison Football Club. If you watch the update at all, you know I covered the club because I'm a soccer nerd. And when you're the boss, you get to assign yourself to cover soccer if you like soccer. So that's how I ended up on the soccer beat. Forward Madison, though, is a great community partner. They're obviously a very community centric club, and they are a sponsor of our men's leadership summit, which is coming up Wednesday and Thursday of this week. It's online. It's entirely online. It's men or women can attend. It's not just for it's men on the panels, and it's talking about men of issues important to men of color, masculinity, fatherhood, entrepreneurship, just a wide range of things. But of course, anybody can come and listen. The Women's Summit then is in June, and Fort Madison's going to support that as well. So you can register online now. It's free. You can go to wisconsinleadershipsummit.com and then just click on the Men's Summit link to register. And we appreciate Fort Madison and their support. All right. So you might have heard whenever this sort of thing happens, it takes a little while for the information to filter through, right? So you might have heard that about 1:45 yesterday afternoon, a police officer shot and killed a 20-year-old man in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, just a few miles from where Derek Chauvin is on trial right now for killing George Floyd. This is a suburb of Minneapolis. The a lot of as always is the case, there's always like what happened. There's not a lot of information, a lot of rumor and stuff. So there was a press conference today that I got to watch. So I'm going to bring up to speed on what I know, and we can talk through some of the stuff. Now, they did show. This is credit to this police chief. Tim Gannon is the police chief who released. I'm not going to show the video, but he released the body camera video, which is rare. Which he said, in fact, that like the district attorney's office told him not to do because it might taint the investigation. But he wanted to be transparent. He wanted to show it. I think he thinks it actually shows the officer in a good light. I don't know. It doesn't, but I think that's one thing might be what he thinks. But basically, what happened was Daunte Wright was pulled over for having expired license plates. Apparently, based on some questions that came from the press at this press conference, there's been a months-long delay in getting license plate renewals during the pandemic. So in any case, he got pulled over for that. And then they found out he had a misdemeanor warrant, which was apparently, according to some other subsequent reporting, was basically a bench warrant that he had missed a court date. So he wasn't wanted on a felony or anything like that. He was wanted. He had a bench warrant because he missed a court date. And so they went try to take him into custody. And for whatever reason, who knows what he's thinking, he decided to wrestle away and jump back into the car and try to he would. I don't think he hadn't started to drive away yet. He had just wrestled himself free from the person who was holding his hands behind his back and jumped back into the car. At which time, a female officer, one of these, there's three officers there. First of all, I don't know why there's three officers there, but this officer you can see her pointing her firearm at him, and she says, "Taser, taser, taser," and then shoots him once. And then he manages to drive away. And she turns to the other officers and says, in a surprised tone, "I shot him." Now we know he crashed the car a couple blocks later and died over there. This is a good question. I only watched the video once, just during the press conference. I'll probably take a look at it again. This is a great question, Gene. Jean Marie. I don't think that he was. My impression was that they had places they were holding his hands behind his back, and were about to put handcuffs on him when he wrestled away. They were definitely planning to. You can see it in this. I just did a screen capture of the video. You can see they've got his hands behind his back here. Right there, you can see his hands behind his back. And I'm not sure why, but this officer that shot him actually approached over here and was like, I don't know if she was checking his pockets or what she was doing. But at that point is when he wrestled away. It is my belief, based on just viewing it once, and the fact that he managed to drive away, it's my belief that they had not fully handcuffed him at that point yet. Although it's entirely possible I might be wrong about that. In any case, this officer, she was reaching into his pockets, and she didn't say anything like, "I'm reaching into your pockets," or "Do you have it in your pockets?" At least from what I saw. So it's also very possible. So she thinks she's holding her taser in her hand, even though the police chief said during this press conference that your service weapon is on whatever your dominant hand is. If you're right-handed, your service weapon goes on your right side, and your taser goes on your left side. Right? So she had drawn her service weapon, and I believe this. Okay, just based on the way the video goes, when she says taser, 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 that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to alert everybody around you that you're about to deploy a taser. So she honestly thought in that second that she was about to deploy a taser, but it was a firearm instead. She only hit him once. It was enough. Now the police chief referred to it as an accidental discharge, which I don't think is accurate. She said taser, 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 as if to say, I am going to deploy my taser. Therefore, she thinks she's holding a taser, and she intentionally, it seemed to me, deployed what she thought was a taser. So I don't think the gun went off accidentally. I think she intended it to go off, but not realizing it was a gun, thinking it was a taser. So I'm not going to call it an accidental shooting. At best, that's negligent. In Wisconsin, just pointing a gun at somebody is a crime. Accidentally or negligently discharging a gun that kills somebody is a crime. It's a felony. He declined to say who she was. He thinks because the another agency, an outside agency, is investigating, as is always the case in these things. So the police chief did not identify the officers involved. That will come out soon. I would imagine by tonight we'll know the identities of those officers, or maybe tomorrow. But he did say she was a very senior officer. So how a very senior officer gets a gun in her hand, thinks it's a taser, is beyond me. What else can I tell you? Oh, the mayor of Brooklyn Center, his name is Mike Elliott. He he said that he supports that officer being fired. There's due process. The sheriff, the police chief didn't rule that out, but didn't say he would fire her either because obviously there's due process. There's an investigation. The mayor said she should go. The other interesting thing that happened in this press conference is the police chief took a few questions and left, and the mayor dragged him back in. He turned to the police, whoever was there, and said, "Is there a reason? Is there a public safety problem? Is there something like really happening right now that the police chief needs to be somewhere else? Because if not, can he come back and take some more questions?" And he brought him back in to face some more questions. This is a good question from Corey. Is the construction? I had this thought too, and this is what I would have asked if I were at the press conference, but I wasn't. If they do feel the same, if a taser and a gun feels the same in your hand, maybe that's a design flaw in the taser, right? I mean, there are lots of different ways to design something that would deploy an electric shock. It doesn't have to feel just like a gun. But maybe that's something that'll come out of this. Maybe we'll redesign our tasers at some point. Yeah, and the other thing I'll mention is there were protests last night, and tear gas was deployed. Protesters I haven't seen. There hasn't been a lot of good video of the protests. Protesters have said they were not violent. The police chief said that they were throwing frozen cans of pop, which is how you know he's from Minnesota. He called it pop. I don't think anybody was that. That doesn't seem credible to me. That people were throwing frozen cans of soda. Like, who would? That's a level of planning that I don't think people would would do it. Nobody's going to freeze a 6-pack of soda to throw at the police. Like, that's just not going to happen. But he said they were throwing frozen cans of soda and bricks and stuff at the police. And I don't know how credible that is, if that was true or not. The police did turn off all the lights for some reason, which caused some problems. This has been mentioned quite a bit, Rita. This is an excellent observation. You remember the Fruitvale Station shooting many years ago, whenever that was. Doesn't seem like very long ago, but it was quite a long time ago. But yeah, this is basically the same thing. Happened. The guy said the story was that he was reaching for his taser and got his gun accidentally. Here's the thing about qualified immunity, though. Pernicious says this is why officers need personal malpractice type insurance. They don't need that right now because they're basically immune from lawsuits. It's qualified immunity. A police officer in most states and in most situations basically can't be sued. There's very little personal liability risk in carrying around a taser and a gun and a club and everything else that they carry. It's just they're just not going to get sued no matter what they do with it. A city might have to pay out a settlement, which is what happened with here in Madison. The city paid out over $3 million to the mother of Tony Robinson, but that was paid by an insurance company. That didn't really hurt anybody, and certainly Matt Kenny didn't get sued. It couldn't be sued, and is still on the job. But to end qualified immunity is would do what you're saying, Pernisha. If you're saying that if you want police officers to have to think twice, think that they might get sued if they act out of line, and in qualified immunity, which actually there was a state. One of you knows this. There was a state who recently just ended qualified immunity. Was it New Mexico? Is that right? I think it might be New Mexico or Nevada. basically ended qualified immunity. Thank you, Rita. It was 2008 that the Fruitvale Station shooting took place. It was. It feels like yesterday sometimes, but it was quite a while ago. All right, so that's what we know. We know that uh, there were games scheduled tonight for the Twins. We're hosting the Red Sox, and um, there's an NHL hockey game, and the Timberwolves were hosting somebody tonight. Also, they all have canceled their games, ostensibly out of respect for the family of Daunte Wright. Although it seems like they're also kind of scared of protesters, which they probably don't need to be. There was this. Jimmy says she was watching European Riot, which is a great social media company that covers these things. And there was a lot of talk in this press conference, as is always the case, about peaceful protesters. We welcome peaceful protesters, which is such problematic dialogue. I'm sorry, I have to rant a little bit about this. Because first of all, you're saying there's a correct and a proper way to protest, and you can not enjoy, you can go through your life and not enjoy when people destroy buildings. But even a protest that doesn't destroy a building is not peaceful. You can't tell me Reverend Martin Luther King or any of the civil rights movement in the 1960s. You can't tell me those were peaceful protests. They were nonviolent. I don't think peace is the emotion that they had on their mind. And after the death of George Floyd in early June in Madison, I went and covered those protests. And the very first one, it was like 4 hours on a Saturday afternoon. It was not violent. There was no destruction until much later that night by a different group of people. But it was peace was not what was felt on the ground. It was not peaceful. So this idea that we will condone peaceful protests as long as you behave yourself, as long as you are not upset, as long as you don't make us upset, then we will protect your protest. It's just frustrating, and the language is really important. As a journalist, as a writer, language is really important. And the protest last night, it looked to me, from the very limited bit I saw, to be nonviolent. There was some building damage apparently, but not a hell of a lot. And but I wouldn't call this protest peaceful, right? They were upsetting because people were upset, justifiably. All right, let's. We'll keep on this story. There's another police problem that we talk about. We talked about this a little bit on the podcast this morning. This is an Army lieutenant who was pulled over in Virginia. This is going all the way back to December. Okay, that he was coming home from work. He's a medical officer. His name was Carol Nazario. He's black and Latino. He was pulled over for not having tags on his car, and having tinted windows. And he's now suing this police department for using excessive force because they were tasing him and they were banging on his knees and trying to get him and over nothing, So we found out today that one of those officers that was involved in that has been fired. The way they wrote the press release on that is intentionally ambiguous, such that you can't tell. What it says is, we started an investigation right away back in, December when this first happened. We've disciplinary action and additional training has happened, and since then, one of those officers has been fired. So it's open to interpretation that they might have fired him 2 months ago, or they might have fired him yesterday when this all came to light. Because this wasn't widely reported until this lawsuit was filed. So it's possible that they just fired him finally when it started to get attention. But it's also possible the way they wrote it that they fired him like a month or two ago. So it's intentionally ambiguous press releases are one of my least favorite things. All right, local news now, and slightly more positive news. This is Dr. I'm sorry, I have to get this. I have to get his name correct. Marvin Pryor, Dr. Marvin Pryor. I was going to say Martin, and I knew that was wrong. Marvin Pryor. He is a nationally touring jazz musician. He plays the trombone, obviously, in his band, the PR Experience. And he is also the new chief academic officer for Madison Metro School District. We've been talking for a couple of weeks. We've been doing some profiles and stuff about the new sort of upper level administration at the Madison Metropolitan School District under the new superintendent, who is the first Black superintendent to lead Madison Metro School District, which is minority. I don't like that word minority, but it's the white students are the minority at Madison Metro School District. Most of the students are Black and Latino. So to have a Black man running it takes a new direction, right? So he's installing this cabinet, and Dr. Pryor has 30 years of experience as an educator. And was a band director, music teacher in Georgia, and then later a school principal. And then he came up to Madison just last year, 2020, to be one of the secondary school chiefs, and has now been promoted to chief academic officer. He spoke with our reporter Mackenzie Crum, who did a very nice job on a profile of him, so you get to know him and his priorities and his support for the vision of anti-racism and equity in the school district. And that's at Madison365.org right now. The other thing I'll mention real quick is I recommend you give a listen to Black Oxygen this morning. I admit I have not had a chance to listen yet. Been a very busy day, but I'm going to give it a listen tonight. Keith Borden he owns a yoga studio, and he's a minister, and he's a musician, this singer, vocalist, and Black Oxygen is all about breathing and being centered and being present, and so obviously a yogi is a perfect guest for that show, right? And apparently it's a very good conversation. So wherever you get your podcasts, just find Black Oxygen, and you'll give it a listen. You'll enjoy it. Pranisha asked an important question going back to the officer that got fired. Does firing an officer prevent the officer from getting hired elsewhere? And this is depending who you talk to, I would consider this a flaw in the American policing system. A police union would tell you differently. And, of course, we do in this country, we believe in second chances and so on and so on. But no, there's nothing to stop that guy from getting hired somewhere else. And there's nothing that even says that any other police, there's not even a mark on his record, really. Right? Like, you'd think if there was some sort of central database of disciplinary actions or complaints or criminal convictions, even, I guess that would pop up in a background check. But if this guy's fired, like, whoever's hiring him next won't necessarily know that he got fired for excessive force. So he could very easily end up working private security. He could very easily end up working for a sheriff's office or another police department. Oh, we saw that in Wauwatosa. Police officer that shot somebody last year was fired and was hired by the sheriff's office, patrolling the same community. He's at the county level rather than the city level. And there's really because police departments are local and run by their local police fire commissions. There's nothing to stop the next town over from hiring him, and there's nothing even would indicate or require that other police department would know about the record, about the incident, unless they happen to read about it at Madison365, or somewhere, unless they would just know it. So yeah, that's the answer to your question. Yes, in fact, right. That Officer Wauwatosa was I don't remember if it was 2 or 3. Honestly, I don't want to say definitively without knowing for sure, because it was just a tangent, an example. But yes, he had been involved in multiple shootings over the years. It wasn't all at once. It was sort of a pattern. And he eventually got fired and then hired by the sheriff's office. Right there. Okay, so that is all of that news. And we're going to take a short break. I've been going on for quite a while. We're going to take a short pause and hear from the sponsor, and then we'll get into the COVID news, which is, I know, kind of why you tune in. So give me 30 seconds. Don't go away. We'll be right back with some good news on the vaccines and some not so good news on the virus.
Here in the Midwest, community is important.
Having a healthcare system that's looking out for us,
that's actively addressing the racial disparities in healthcare, is important.
When we can get good quality care, we can do more. We can achieve more.
We can be the kind of community we want to be, and that's really important.
UW Health. Remarkable medicine. Remarkable care.
Okay, we're back. We're going to talk through some COVID. It won't take too long because our case is, the number of cases today is slightly lower because it's Monday, right? So last time I talked to you, we had just reported 1,100 cases on Friday, almost 1,100. Today is 402, which is lower, but the testing was lower also. But we reported 1,370 over the weekend, 804 on Saturday, and 569 on Sunday. So our day-to-day average of new cases is up to 789, which that's getting a little bit on the high side for me, frankly. And worse, our 7-day positive test rate is back up to 3.8. It was 3.8. It's been 3.8 basically since Thursday. It dipped slightly yesterday to 3.7. I've been harping on this for months. We got to get that below 3.0. And we did for a little while. For like a month, it was below 3.0. It got all the way down to 2.0 on March 14th. That's as low as it's been. And it's just been inching its way back up, and now it's almost 4.0. The spread of the virus is not as bad as it was in the fall, obviously, but we can no longer say that it's under control. And the thing is, we really need to keep it under control so that we can get the vaccines done, right? We're not just holding it down to hold it down as long as we can, the way we had to last year. We're holding it down for a couple of more months until we get the vaccines done. Because right now we need our county health departments, we need our health systems, we need our doctors, we need our clinics, we need everybody focused on getting vaccines out there. We'll talk about vaccines in a second because those are going pretty good. But we need that to be done. We need them to focus on that rather than caring for COVID cases or trying to keep COVID spread down, right? So it's not good that we're losing control of it just as we're trying to catch up with vaccines. So keep your masks on. Keep your distance, do all the things. Unless you're vaccinated. Until you're vaccinated, then, still be cool. Still be like, keep your distance, wear your mask in public, where it's mandated, etc. Because even, but be kind to people who aren't vaccinated. You don't necessarily have to flaunt your vaccine status, but enjoy yourself if you're vaccinated. But if you're not, couple more months. That's all we got to do. Now, the state is reporting that at this point, today they're only reporting about just under 10,000 new doses on Sunday, it's a Sunday. But 58,000 doses a day for the past 7 days, which is great. I mean, 3 weeks ago, that was 45,000. a month ago, it was like 5,000. I guess like 2 months ago when we first were really ramping up vaccines, it was about 5,000 a day. Now we're at 58,000 a day. That's great. So right now we're at 24.3% done. We need to get that to 80. We don't have to get to 100. I don't think we're ever going to get to 100. But we got to get that to about 75 to 80% of the population vaccinated. We're now 24.3% fully vaccinated. That translates to 1.4 million people. We've got about almost 2.2 million people who've gotten at least one dose, which is great. I will say also, this is interesting. The share of these doses that are the single dose Johnson & Johnson is growing. It is now 4.4% of all the doses that have been given are that single dose Johnson & Johnson. That was 2% last week. So I think that's good. I know a lot of people think that the Johnson & Johnson is slightly less effective or whatever. I think it's slightly less effective in terms of preventing infection, but it's just as effective in preventing hospitalization and death, that's the main thing, right? So what Johnson & Johnson does is there's still like a 10% chance that you'll get infected, or less, probably less than that actually, but if you do get infected, like you're gonna cough a little bit and it's gonna be gone. Like it's not gonna be a big deal, that's what you want. So generally speaking, I think with the exception of the racial disparities, which continue to be a problem, the vaccination news is pretty good. Just the raw numbers of people getting vaccinated is good. We're still reaching out to some folks to try to get more information about these vaccines and about how the state is working to get vaccines into those more vulnerable communities. But I know that is underway. There's $6 million of $6 million of state money going into that. I don't think that this is not true, Gene. If you could elaborate in a comment perhaps on what you mean by that, but if you mean that that the vaccine is causing people to become infected, that's just false. And I would appreciate if you'd not. This is a real news channel, a real news show. We are a real news outlet, so I'd appreciate if you'd not spread disinformation on our comments. But if you mean something, because here's one way that might actually be partially true. That that I think the fact that we have vaccines going is actually causing some people to lower their guard. Right? I think there's some sense that the vaccine is here, we can relax now. Right? So in that sense, the fact that vaccines are readily available and that they're very visible and that a lot of people are getting them actually might be causing some of these cases because people are letting their guard down when they're not vaccinated yet. So that said, the vaccine itself is not causing an upsurge in cases. That's just false. If you mean something else, feel free to elaborate, but I'm pretty sure that that's just... If what you're saying is people getting vaccinated is causing infection, that's not true. The vaccines are mRNA vaccines. They don't contain virus. So the being vaccinated will not cause you... the vaccine will not cause you to test positive, is what I'm saying. Here's the other issue, too. I'm getting inbox. Do you remember... this is not wrong. I think that's people not masking up is part of the whole just letting our guard down, right? And the repeal of the mask mandate, the total lack of enforcement of the mask mandate anywhere other than Madison and Milwaukee and Kenosha, Racine, and I guess Rock County, but basically anywhere north of Sauk County, they're just kind of not enforcing it, and they never did. And now that it's not, now that the Supreme Court's repealed it, nobody's enforcing it really. And now I'm getting these inbox messages from... Do you remember the people who last April there was a big reopen Wisconsin protest But we're only like a month into this thing. We had a big protest. And I remember that day I was covering the protest at the Capitol. And I had to keep telling people to get back. Stay 6 feet away from me. Stop it. Stop trying to breathe on me. But that day was like the worst day we'd ever had, and was like 300 cases. I remember getting a text from Stephanie, who does our data. Like, I'm on the Capitol Square, and she's like, it's a bad day. There's 300 cases. Now that attitude is basically embodied, as Kathy mentions, in everybody not wearing masks. And now I'm getting Facebook inboxes from these same people trying to get their school district over there in Burlington to stop requiring masks for school. But guess what? You want school to be open, you got to put masks on. If you don't have masks on in school, they're going to have to close the schools, and we're going to go back to virtual learning. And who wants that? So they're still trying. That faction, that there's this personal individual liberties faction, is still trying to kill us all. Because their liberty, their personal freedom to not wear a mask. Now they all wear clothes, they all wear shoes, they're all fine with that being required. But because their individual liberty to not wear a mask is more important than your right to live. It's just very frustrating. But yeah, it's that attitude that leads to uptick in cases, along with there's a lot of people who aren't quite that strident about it, who just kind of want it to be done and feel like, okay, we got the vaccines, everything's good. Whew, we made it. But we haven't made it yet. Right? We have about 3 more months. A lot of people could get sick. A lot of people could die in the next 3 months if we're not careful. So let's keep it cool. Keep your mask on. Keep your distance. Okay? All right. That is all I have for you today. I appreciate your time and your questions and your comments as always. You guys are the best community. Here's the other thing. Oh, Kathy makes a good point here. I want to mention one thing. The other problem with cases spreading is every time cases spread, there's a chance to make a new variant. That's how evolution works. Right? So we know of at least 4 variants that are present in Wisconsin. We'll get an update on those on Thursday. But the more the virus spreads, the more chances it has to mutate, the more chances it has to crop up new variants that might be either more dangerous, more contagious, or that more resistant to the vaccine. All that is bad news. That's yet another layer of reasons we got to keep it under control. So that's it. I was mentioning that I don't know that any other media outlet in this town could do a live like this and have this real dialogue with real smart and informed people the way I do. And I can't tell you how much I value that, and I hope you value it as well. And that's what we do. That's community journalism. That's the sort of the for a long time, the last 75 years probably. The journalism has been. I have the information. I choose which information is most important, and I put it at you. I throw it at you, and that's it. Community journalism now it's different. There's a dialogue. Like, you tell me what you want to know, I help you find it. I figure it out for you, and you ask me questions, and you bring more information, and you add to what I'm telling you, and you all dialogue with each other, and we're all in it together, right? We're all becoming more informed together, and that's what community, nonprofit community journalism is all about. And I appreciate that so much, and I appreciate you joining me every day here, and I appreciate you joining me today. If you want to support the work and continue, we still take donations all year round. Madison365.org/donate. to support the work we do, and just keep tuning in. And maybe the biggest thing you could do, honestly, right now, is just share this, help other people find it, because we do have a lot of supporters. We have a lot of corporate supporters. This community is great for that. But because the world is what it is, the more people are watching the show, the more sponsors are going to want to be part of it and support it that way. So share it, get more people involved, get more people to comment, get more people to be part of this community. Right? Okay. That is my rant for today. Have a wonderful evening. And we will see you again tomorrow. We'll definitely have some updates on the Minnesota shooting and some other stuff at the podcast tomorrow morning. And It's Only 10 Minutes podcast. And I'll be back here tomorrow at 4. We'll see you then. Take care.
This is 365 Media.